welcome to week 4. God, guys, and girls. All right, so I feel like we've got through the heavy hitters, right? So we got through sex, we got through lust, we got through those things. And so tonight we're talking about dating. Hopefully, this is going to be a little bit more fun, maybe a little bit less heavy in some ways. But I've been really enjoying this series and being able to talk through all these things. Now, I'm going to say this. We weren't originally planning to do this, but we're actually going to do one more bonus section. You're like, oh my goodness, Luke, I felt so awkward through this whole thing. I was hoping tonight would be the end. Well, tonight's not the end. You're going to come back next week, and we're actually going to talk about what should I look for in a spouse. So I think that's going to be a really helpful thing. So we'll be thinking about that. What should I look for in a spouse? And if you have any questions about relationship, love, all those kinds of things, that you feel like, I didn't really 100% feel like I got an answer, in the series, that's okay. I'd love to hear whatever question you have, and we'd love to answer. So if you let any of your group leaders, if you have a question tonight that you want us to address about anything relationship-oriented, we will do it. Now, I'm not going to say who said it, I'm not going to call you out, anything like that. But if you have a question, I'd love to help you think about whatever it may be. So one of the things I remember when I was getting married, that was really exciting was I would never be on the dating scene again. So it's exciting, like when you're married, like things are settled, but let's just say like dating is this odd thing where like life is just very unsettled. It creates stress and drama. There's all this awkward and in between. You don't know what she's thinking, you don't know what he's thinking. So there's that awkwardness, the stress of the first date, and after you have the first date, is she gonna have a second day? What should I say? What shouldn't I say? What should we do? What does she like? When do I meet her family? When do we know to put a label? Like, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of stress and anxiety that all comes up with dating. Now, I'll just say this. We'll do a little survey in here. I have a few things that sometimes can kind of happen in dating. So if this ever happened to you, just let me know. You can raise your hand. So have you ever stared, you can be honest, at a message to a guy or girl you're interested in and trying to decide if you're going to hit the send button?
Oh, yeah.
How many of you have done that? It's okay. Okay. We do that? Okay, that's okay. Next one. Have you ever had trouble sleeping because you were thinking about the guy or girl you're interested in? Some of you are not telling the truth. This is a safe place. Next one. Have you ever been frustrated with a friend for spending too much time with a boyfriend or girlfriend, not enough time with you? Yes, that happens. A friend, you get frustrated with a friend, that's a true one. Next one. You did something kind of dumb, immediately looked around to see if he or she was looking. Anybody? It happens. Here we go, next one. You had your heart broken from a breakup or somebody not being interested. Ooh, that hurts a little bit more. Yeah. Right? There's a lot that happens in dating and relationships, and it's hard and it's awkward. And sometimes, it's hard because we're all playing by like these different kinds of sets of rules. And so in, my culture, probably, there are just some unwritten rules that, so like one of the unwritten rules is like girls shouldn't ask guys on a first date. Because if you did, you kind of seemed a little bit more desperate, maybe. Guys kind of like the hunt, the thrill, the chase, if you make it that easy for them. Now, like, girls can go like all the way up to that line, and they can make it super obvious, but you can't take that step. So that was always like an unwritten rule. Another unwritten rule I found in relationships, never text just hey. Because you have like nothing to say, you're just like, hey. And, like, you get a text that says, hey, like, what am I supposed to do with this? I don't know. And like, good morning's not much better. So that's not a good thing to do. Unwritten rule. Another unwritten rule, if they leave you on bread, maybe 2 times in a row, it's probably time to, how many people would go higher than 2? Anybody go to 3 if they leave you on bread 3 times? Is anybody texting back and forth? I don't know. But anyways, if they do that, then then it's time to move on typically. And then another one, obviously, be honest, when you don't date your friend's ex. At least immediately. You can wait a little bit, maybe, and that horrible, cruel person suddenly becomes good again in the semester and you start to like them, then it's maybe okay. But whatever it is, there's like this timeline, like, you're not supposed to date a friend's ex for a little while. Any other unwritten rules somebody has, or you feel like that are out there that I didn't catch? PG? You just got to throw it out there. If you don't have any, that's okay. But those are some unwritten rules, right? That can come with dating. And yeah, you have one?
Don't call her friends hot. My friend did that and he got beat.
Don't call her friends hot.
Don't call any girl hot.
That's Miss Nicole's rule. I like that.
Say she's
That's
beautiful.
funny. I guess it didn't work out for him. I guess they...
No, they're not together.
I wonder why. That's so funny. Oh, goodness. Well, a lot of times, there's just like these unwritten rules, and what we wanted to do is, we really wanted to unpack, okay, so there's these things out there that everyone kind of knows, but maybe they're not written down. But the good thing is God, in God's Word, He does have written rules for us. And, remember last week we talked about sex, and we said God has a lot to say about sex. And then we kind of go to dating. I think, what does the Bible say about dating? And the answer, honestly, is not too much. Not too much, if I'm being 100% honest with you guys. Because back then in their day, do you remember how people decided to get married? Arranged marriages. How many of you know about an arranged marriage? So your mama and your daddy, and their mama and their daddy, they're going to say, hey, your son and my daughter, they're going to get married. I'm going to give you a bunch of sheep and pigs and barley and hay and olive oil and anything else that you would trade in Minecraft for, I don't know, what else do you get? What's that onyx stuff? Obsidian. Or obsidian, whatever you've been mining, whatever you get, iron. Exactly, you're trading all these kinds of things, right? So in their culture, they didn't have this thing called dating. You were a friend, an acquaintance, or you were a wife. There was no boyfriend, there was no girlfriend, there was no significant other, nothing like that, nothing in between. So we got to recognize it's a little bit different today, but at the same time, God has a lot to say about relationships. God has a lot to say about marriage. And I think we can take a lot of good principles from there and apply it to this awkward thing that we call dating in our culture. So we're going to be looking at some guidelines. These are probably what you can say God's written rules. We're going to be, again, looking through several different scriptures to try and understand, what should dating look like? So here we go. First thing, God's number one dating rule. We should honor and respect one another. We should honor and respect one another. Give me Romans 12:10. Love one another deeply as brothers and sisters. Take the lead in honoring one another. So you need to have this high respect, a high love, a high mindset of the person you're dating. We're to love all people deeply, not necessarily in a romantic way, but in a healthy way. And even that standard gets raised when we're talking about someone who we're dating. That's a really important thing. We have to love and honor, respect this person in the relationship. And I like that. Take the lead. Take the lead in honoring, in loving, and respecting that person. Here's another verse. Philippians 2:3. Do what? Do nothing. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility consider others as more important than yourselves. Everyone should look not to his own interests, but rather to the interests of others. So that means that when I'm in a relationship, I'm not going to live selfishly. Remember we talked about love versus lust. What was the difference? Lust is selfish, and love is selfless. Perfect. And so if we're keeping that in mind, he's saying, hey, do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit. So if we're going to truly love and honor other people, we've got to be looking out for others. And this is that same passage that talks about how Jesus demonstrated that he wasn't primarily concerned about himself. Jesus stepped down from heaven to take on the limitations of a human body, to die on a cross, and to give himself for us and then rise again. And so how do we love? It's like Jesus. Loving, honoring, respecting one another. And then this is like everyone's favorite verse, Matthew 7:12. Do you know what this verse is called? The golden rule, right? Whatever you want others to do for you, do the same for them. This is the law of the prophets. Right? If you want to be honored and loved and respected, you just say, how about you honor, love, respect others? And especially in our relationship. Do you want to be treated with kindness? Treat others with kindness, right? The Bible is talking all about these things. And so when you're in a relationship with anyone, you're never going to treat them as your property or as your possession. Like, that's not how it is. Or like, well, you're my girlfriend, so you got to do this for me. No. That's not the way of honor and respect, right? We're not living selfishly, we're living selflessly. So we need to honor and guard against selfish thinking. It has to take a high priority in our life. We gotta honor his or her family. There's really important people in their life that we need to honor. We need to honor their friends. Maybe you like some of them, maybe you don't, but that doesn't mean you need to always trash them, critique them, do all those kinds of things. We need to respect, honor their walk with God. Respect, honor their time commitments. There are different things that they're involved in, and maybe they don't always have time for you. That's okay. Honor their commitments. I like this one. Respect or honor his or her no. Hey, if you're trying to make a move on somebody and she says no with her words or her body language, you got to stop. Same thing with the girls. If they say no ever, they're uncomfortable, you got to respect that no. You can't move forward on that. And I'll just say, if you're in a relationship and you feel like that no isn't being respected, I'd say get out of that relationship because that's not healthy if they're going to be going way farther than that. So you deserve better, right? You deserve better than someone who's not going to love and respect you. So that's a big one. Honor and respect. Here's the second one. Be equally yoked. Be equally yoked. Now, how many of you have played the three-legged race? You love the three-legged race. How many of you enjoy the three-legged race? Anybody? Oh, I always enjoy the three-legged race. Well, it's not if you get dragged through the mud, but it's always good, like camp game or whatever. We always do it somehow. But the picture of the three-legged race, right, is that you are bound to somebody. And so, back in the Bible days, when they would want to plow a field, that they would take a big ox, typically, and why use one ox when you can use two oxen? And so they want to have two horses or two ox that will plow that field, that will break up that spoil so that it can be ready to go. And a yoke is the piece of wood that goes on both animals right over them and it connects them. And it's really essential that both of these animals, first off, they both have to be like the same type of animal, right? You can't have different things going, that doesn't work too well. But then also, they got to be moving the same direction, right? In the three-legged race, if you're not moving in step, you're not moving in sync, you're not moving in the right direction, same direction, it's just not going to work, right? And then they've got to be similar size to carry the strength, the load correctly. So that's the picture that Paul's talking about here in this next verse, 2 Corinthians 6, verses 14 and 15. Now, this is a verse probably a lot of you have heard before, and we talk about it a lot of times with marriage. I'll just say in context, he's talking more about problems in the church, that there's a problem in this church, and there are some people who are saying that they are Christians, in reality they aren't, they're unbelievers. And Paul's saying, look, you can't bind yourself, you can't be yoked together with someone who claims to be a Christian but isn't. So that's the principle he's going there, but I think there is a really clear implication for us in relationships, in marriage certainly, in dating certainly as well. Let's read it together. This is an important verse. 2 Corinthians 6:14. Do not be yoked together with those who do not believe. For what partnership is there between righteousness and lawlessness? Or what fellowship does light have with darkness? What agreement does Christ have with Belial? Have you ever heard of Belial? It's Satan. Or what does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? And so what he's saying is this. If you are bound, you're yoked, you're connected, and you're a Christian, and they're not, you've got to recognize you're spiritually opposed to one another. One of you is light, one of you is darkness. One of you is following Christ, one of you is following the ways of the world and Satan himself. And so fundamentally, at the very core of your being, you are incompatible. That's what Paul's telling us. And he said, we can't yoke ourselves to that. Because when you do that, you're allowing someone who is opposed to who you are have a major influence on your life. They're going to have a major influence about the direction. That's what the yoke is for. It's about the direction. And if you're not following the same master, you're not going to work together. You're not going to move together. And that's the principle. So we can't let the most important, the most intimate, the most influential relationship in our entire life be bound with somebody who isn't a believer. So they say, okay, look, I get that. Okay, I see how that could apply to marriage, but can you find a passage that speaks specifically? Well, I think so. 1 Corinthians 7:39. Paul gives us, again, super clear instructions about who are the kind of people we should marry. So this is a case about a wife, her husband has passed away. She's free to be married to anyone she wants. And look, what's Paul's one thing he says? What's the one qualification that he gives for who you can marry based on biblical worldview? Only in the Lord. So who should he marry? Someone in the Lord. That's the principle. That's what he's showing us. We have to be 100% clear, right? If we are marrying somebody who's not a believer, we're not following the scriptures. And can we go a step farther? Again, we're in this awkward thing called dating. If we're dating someone who's not a Christian, we're playing with fire. Because it's putting us on that trajectory of where we may go into sin. And I'll just tell you, even if you could maybe swim out of the letter of the law, I do think this applies to dating here as well. It certainly violates the spirit, I think, of this verse to say that we could be bound, that we could be in increasing intimacy and deep relationship with an unbeliever. So what's the easiest way? How do I make sure that I don't marry an unbeliever? Don't date an unbeliever. It really is that simple. And so you're never going to marry someone in your life who you don't date. And so to keep yourself from that trajectory, date believers, not unbelievers. Well, Pastor Luke, I'm missionary dating. Have any of you heard that idea? Which I always think that's a funny term, because the term missionary means like going to as many different people as you can. And then dating is all about like one person. So I just think like missionary dating, it's like, are you going to try to like date as many girls you can at Timberland High School and win them off to Jesus? Like, I don't think that's what you're a creeper if that's what you're up to. I don't think that's what it means. But sometimes, when you think about those two things, again, that's kind of silly, but they don't go together. But I think, honestly, a lot of times we think about that and we have a good intention, right? Man, I want to see this person come to Christ. That's a good intention. That's a good thing that you want to see. But I'll tell you, being in a dating relationship with that person is just going to really, really complicate that whole thing. When we have all of the drama of dating, the entanglement of our emotions, that's going to make it really hard for us to be absolutely focused on helping them spiritually. So I would say maybe try and find somebody who could help be a gospel influence in their life and allow them to speak into their life. Because here's the problem. If we don't do that, and we say, okay, we're going to do this missionary day, the problem is your goal line, it keeps moving and moving and moving and moving and moving. And then your emotions get in, and your brain will begin to rationalize things that you know aren't right, and you're going to trick yourself into thinking, hey, maybe they have a faith, maybe they're okay, when everybody else can see that's not the case, and you in your heart of hearts don't do that. It's hard. But Pastor Luke, I know it's worked out for these other couples. Like she brought him to church, and then he got saved. There are, and I'll say this, there are 100% stories like that. And praise God that there are stories like that where, hey, the influence of somebody godly brought someone else to Christ. That's wonderful. I've seen it happen. I don't doubt what God can do. But I like how one professor, he said it this way. Your responsibility in that case is not to think about what the Lord can do, but what the Lord has told you to do. So we got to be less focused on, God, I'm going to absolutely bang on you saving this guy, so I'm going to date him. No, we've got to take serious this thing. Hey, don't bind yourself to somebody who is an unbeliever. We have to pay attention to it. Let me take it a step farther. You need to be probably someone and paired with somebody who's at an equal spiritual footing to you. This is what I mean. I'm not saying to look down on everybody else and say, they're really, really weak and all that kind of stuff. No. That's not what I mean. But I'm just saying, if somebody's like really new to the faith, or they just came out of a major struggle, it might be wise to give them a little time to build some spiritual strength, to kind of get there. And outside of a relationship, and allow them to do that before you get yoked to them. Again, the picture of the yoke is not that one ox drags the other ox. They're working together, moving forward together. So we want to be connected to a person who's connected, following with the Lord, who's going to push you toward that. So, be equally yoked. Third, we have to flee from sexual immorality. We talked a lot about that last week, but that's what we got to do. In our relationships, we got to set good boundaries, healthy things, because if we don't, sometimes things can go farther than we intended. And our friend Derry, remember Derry? He's the one who wrote the devotional and he wrote these lessons. He said in his life that he's seen this go kind of two ways. One, sometimes students, they feel like that they're on the right track, but then, they have a lapse of judgment here, a lapse of judgment there, and then they end up going further than they ever intended. And it just brings like hardship and shame and really hurt in that relationship and other relationships. But he said, I've also seen the other side where there are really good relationships, where there are healthy boundaries and things work out well. Now, most of the time, it doesn't end in marriage, honestly. He said out of his 20 years in youth ministry, he has a youth ministry of like 400 students. He's performed 4 weddings for students who started dating in his ministry. 4 weddings. So we just have to put, look at the odds. They're pretty low. But that's just the reality. We got to be really careful about the boundaries we set. So those are what I would say God's written rules for dating. Those are some biblical principles that I see. Now, I want to take another step. I want to give you a couple of principles that I live by, I think, and I think would be really helpful for you. So, first one, the purpose of dating. The purpose of dating. Luke's dating tips. I needed some music or something for my dating tip. The purpose of dating is determining if you should marry that person. The purpose of dating is determining if you should marry that person. Now, there are a lot of bad reasons that people date. Well, I really want somebody to text. I really want fun stuff to do. I've got to have a date to the prom. I want to do all this kind of stuff. I want to have posts. I'll just tell you, those are our bad reasons to date somebody. Because these are like real people we're talking about, and there are real emotions of all of us kind of going on. And so that doesn't honor and respect them if we're using that out. So we want to date to marry, right? So I'm not saying asking somebody out on a date is the same thing as getting down on one knee and saying, will you marry me, right? That's not the principle, but it's just, I want to get to know you more. I want to see if God would bring both of us together, in a marriage relationship. That's the purpose, that's the goal. We have to know what the goal is. That's what the goal is. Now, when you conclude that this is not the one, this is not the one who's getting the rose, they're not going to be the one who you're going to marry and spend the rest of your life with, I would say then, when you've determined that, you've actually fulfilled the purpose of dating, right? Because you've decided no, and when you do that, then you stop dating them. Then you break up. That's what you do. It's not going to help to push it down the road. Dating someone's not our goal, right? Dating is how we get to marriage. So if the relationship's not leading us to marriage, it's not fulfilling its purpose, so it's not what we want to do. And I'll know this, there's never a good time to break up. Never a good time. It's always hard. It's never a good time. But I'll tell you, the best time is now. Like once you arrive to this conclusion, like, you know what, we're not going to get married. That's the time to break up with them. Because if you see no future, then you fulfill this purpose. And if you drag it on, this is what's going to happen. One, you're just going to drag that person along. That's not fair, honoring, respecting to them and their life and their emotions and all that kind of thing. But also, it's just going to make it harder on you emotionally as you continue building your relationship. It's just going to get harder. Never a good time, but I think now is always the best time. The quicker, the better. All those. Second tip. Set boundaries to help you stick to God's standards. So you got to think about what are some healthy parameters, some good boundaries that we want to put in our life. And these are just a few that maybe not necessarily that you 100% have to live by, but these are things I think worth considering, built upon those biblical principles that we talked about earlier. If you don't mind giving us those next ones. So honor and respect, a couple of rules that we can think about. And again, these are things for you to talk about with the person you're going to date. And you guys can figure this out together. So here's a good one. We'll not talk, text, or FaceTime until our homework's done.
Yes.
So that means, we have to respect each other's time. They have obligations. They have commitments. We want to make sure we're doing that. We'll be committed to stick to any curfew our parents have in place. So if your parent says, hey, you got to be home at 11, 12, whatever it is, that would be the time to make sure you do that. You want to honor and respect their family. Next thing, he's got someone on Equally Yoked. I like this. These are some spiritual rules, right? We'll pray together before we eat any meal on any date. That's a good thing to build that into your relationship. This one, we'll go to church together, but we'll not sit together during service. And again, this is different for everyone, but I do think there's something, I think the heart behind that is you don't want to be so exclusive with that one person that you lose all your relationships with everyone else. So I think that's what that's trying to get at. So we'll go to church together, but I want to make sure that you're still connected with your friends as well. And again, these are just ideas. These are things to consider. I'm not saying 100% you have to do every single one of these. Next one. Flee sexual immorality. Now, on these, I would say a few of these. We'll either go on dates with others, hang out in public areas. Man, that just makes life a lot easier, right? You're a lot less tempted when you're in those kinds of positions. Not laid out side by side anywhere or anytime, right? Stay vertical, not horizontal. Life is easier. We won't FaceTime or text after midnight, right? When nobody else is around you, when you're all alone, let's just be honest. Sometimes we can be tempted in different ways. So we want to set some healthy boundaries there to make sure that we don't go too far. So those are some practical little tips there. Okay, my third big tip, stay connected to others. And this goes back to what I was saying about the church thing, is you don't ever want to see a relationship get so fixed and so focused on one person that they lose the rest of their friends. How many of you have ever seen a relationship like that? Where they are so obsessed with one another that they can't hang out with their friends. That's not what you want. Look, because they're trying to act like they're married, they're their own whole separate thing. That's not what we want. So we want to make sure we're given enough time for our friend time and make sure that there's enough there. Number 4, keep your relationship with Jesus your top priority. Keep your relationship with Jesus your top priority. And again, your relationship. Not 100% their relationship, because you got to own it for yourself. How do I make sure that I, personally, me, am moving forward? And you can do some spiritual stuff. You can do like Bible study. You can pray. I'll just say I was kind of careful on that because for me, my spiritual life, that's like the most intimate, personal thing there. And it felt, to invite a girlfriend or a boyfriend into that area of your life, to me was a little bit too close. So we were a little bit more guarded in that area than we are now. So I would say some of that's okay, but be careful in that. And so we've always got to pursue Jesus in all of it. Here's another tip. On this, your boyfriend or girlfriend is not the best person to be your accountability partner. Not the best person. Find somebody else to do that. So we kind of go back to that big idea we had all the way back in week 1. It comes down to this. Unless I'm wholeheartedly, with everything I have, with everything I am, with everything I'm doing, I'm pursuing Jesus. He's number 1, absolutely. All other relationships, there can be a hopeless attempt to fill that void. And so often, yes, dating, people, relationships, that's the thing that gets in the way, that people want to use to try and fill Jesus. Yeah, God gave us this amazing thing called relationships and love and all these good things. But it's got to be in its right context. Jesus has to be first, because in the end, right, no relationship, no person could ever heal you like Jesus could. No person could ever love you like Jesus did. I love what 1 John 4:19. We love because he first loved us. So we can know what love is. We can experience love. We can be loved because Jesus loved us when he came, he lived, he died on the cross. And that's the perfect image of what it is. And so if you want to have a life that's full, you've got to get that first part right. Wholeheartedly pursuing a relationship with Jesus, calling out, believing in him. And that's where we have life. And so what I want to do is I want to take just a moment as we're closing to just pray over all of you guys. Because I know this is a big deal. As we're thinking about it, as we're surrounded by opportunities we're thinking about, I want to pray over you specifically. Let's go to the Lord. God, we do come to you tonight. I lift up our girls in this ministry who are being pursued by different guys. And we just ask that you would give them wisdom, you'd give them insight about who they should pursue, that you give them wisdom and insight about who they shouldn't pursue. We'd ask that you keep their hearts and their minds focused and set on you totally, and that we wouldn't ever find hope, joy, fulfillment in anything other than you, but rather we totally trust you. I lift up our guys as they seek to live in a way that honors you. Let them love like you loved your church and you gave yourself for us, the church. So let our love not ever be for ourselves, but let us be selfless and wonderful and beautiful, and so that we can bless all sorts of other people through it. And God, we have so many different relationships with different people. And I know, as a student, it can sometimes feel lonely in kind of the dating scene. Sometimes it can, it can cause even humility in us, or humiliation when things don't go wrong or the way we want. But help us not to find our identity in the things of this world. Help us know that we're first and foremost loved by you, and then that we would live in light of it, that we would pursue you above all else. And I pray that you would truly be first. And everything, that our first pursuit would be you, not anything else or anyone else. That we would honor you with our lives. We'd honor you with our relationships, and you'd be glorified in all that we do. It's your name I pray. Amen.